All right there. Well, this is Batman, of course, out here at Apple Valley Mall, which is in the Windsor Heights area of the greater Des Moines metropolitan, whatever. I had a conversation a little while ago, about an hour and a half ago with Rob Gusserson, and we was talking about different possible ways to create a different type of game, right? It's similar to, but different from kind of thing. And there's an element within the game story in my play-by-post on D&D Beyond that it caught his interest, right? It's the possibility of playing the social claiming individual, or acknowledging that, or looking at a player's perspective in a given situation, specifically in a city environment. I told Rob, I think that in Dungeons and Dragons specifically, but in a lot of fantasy hack and slash sword and sorcery type game systems, the cityscape environment, the city environment, is underutilized. In a lot of cases, it's this idea that you're going to shop here, you're gonna spend your loot, you're gonna heal up your wounds, you're gonna get your next bling and your next fancy what have you, pump up your magic, so on and so forth, and get prepped for the next dungeon run, or the next dungeon crawl, or overland journey to wherever to sack somebody, some ancient tower or temple or what have you. And the opportunities for playing in a city environment are vast. Not only are they vast, but they're complicated and complex. Wasn't all that long ago, could be Jody, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the entire, I know it, I read it on a daily basis, and I can't think of your name, the full one, without hunting it down. Maybe I should have wrote it down, right? You made a comment a while back, and I'm making the assumption it was you, that, how much interest would there be in a kind of game system where you are all about the social situation, the higher level maneuvering and backstabbing and manipulating and knowing your opponent's secrets and what they got in their closets, and maybe purposely or accidentally tarnishing their reputations in some manner, and so on and so forth. I'm using a completely different track than what you did, sir, but the idea was a la Game of Thrones, right? Whether you'd have this, the players are much more invested or much more entrenched in things. The idea that in a city situation, we'll look at two different characters. Livvi is this half-elf bard. She is born from a not an outcast per se, but just say kind of an orphan of a city, or this elvish community out in the provinces surrounding the city-state that we're playing in. And her character back then out there was a social climber. She positioned herself on a regular basis to get noticed, to learn how to be, to say the right things and do the right things, and put on that air of aristocratic snobbishness to some degree. That air of nobility. This I'm better than what my station is. I deserve better, and very crafty and uses her wits quite a bit. And she comes to the attention of an NPC who's her contact, and the contact is utilizing her skill sets as a bard, helps her get set up in the city, and now she's running around potentially in circles that are above her station. And she has the moxie and the polish and the drive and ambition to further herself in that line of progression. This character is different from a lot of other characters, and many ways that I'm not being able to really explain in a good way here. But the minute I saw the character and the character's interaction, the way the player handled the character, I was very enthused, right? I was very excited about the potentials on a many levels here. And if you look at the various tropes for the wealthy and the nobility in role-playing games, and specific archaic role-playing games, you have the uber wealthy, you have the old wealth, you have the old bloodlines. It's possible to have an old bloodline and have no money. You know, in that environment, your finances, your house's coffers might be thin or light. So you're going to cash in on your status. You're going to maneuver among your peers because your family is entrenched in the city politics, the city, in the city, it's social situations and culture environment. So you're going to bring other things to the table that you're not going to. It's not going to be gold in this case. A depth of having contacts and knowing people. Your family has patronage all over the city and have patroned other, institutions for hundreds of years. So that patronage has paybacks and payoffs. People owe your family. They owe your family lineage, your family name. Not necessarily the character per se. There's fine differences there. But you do have some power that your station provides. Now, Livvi seeks that environment, wants that, embraces it. This character is potentially someday going to be an important high position person, whether it's through social climbing and marrying into or hacking out her own treasure fund that's going to fund her political career, or manipulate and bribe or get the dirt on the right amount of people or the right people who will help her get where she's going to go, or help those people now, whether she's wittingly doing it or not, who are going to position her in such a manner because it's advantageous to them and it's beneficial to them to do so. Now, I look at this other character. We'll call him Shmi, right? This is our beardless dwarf. This character's a jester, a drunkard, a rumor monger, and a slew of other things that not necessarily conducive to public, discourse. So this character has probably more social status and standing than our would-be aristocrat half-elf. He's a little older, but his social status comes from the other end of the spectrum. He is well established in the lower end of the city. He knows all the haunts. He knows the sewers good enough to use them as his own, way of getting around without. You don't want to go through the public gates. He goes under the wall. He knows how to get there. He is the witting pawn of several wealthy individuals, specifically one called the Widow, which we're just barely exploring at the moment. And he's a tool, and he accepts it, he embraces it, he enjoys this concept. He uses his slovenly behavior and his uncouth nature to his advantage. He's also quite chaotic in a lot of aspects. A chaotically neutral type of character. He does things on a whim that doesn't always make sense, but he ingrains himself with all of his fellow lowlifes and or poor folk, right, from a different angle. So Livvi is trying to cultivate somewhere the tracks in a different way. She ingrains herself with the servers and some of the upper level help in some of the more upper scale restaurants and eateries and taverns. She makes an attempt to communicate and get to know information-wise, the wealthy merchant classes that operate around her, and she utilized her with help of her friend to get a position in a beginning level position in the local government. So Shmi, he maneuvers himself in such a manner that he regularly has these routines that he'll go to this place and then he'll go to that place, and it's just almost chaos incarnate to some degree, but a lot of it's planned and on purpose. His character established that he was a dues-paying member of the Rumor Monger Guild, which is new. Apparently there is one. We have one in the city now. I mean, I'm good with that. And a non-paying member of the Bards Guild, and one of the Thieves Guild in the city. So he has connections on many, many levels. And all these connections, for the most part, are the low end of things. And yet it's the low end of things that tend to get things done in the city. These are the people that the city, upon the backs thereof, the city functions. And be it the poor slobs who clean out the sewers, who through a lot of drunken late night parties and so-called comradeship from this would-be jester. Oh, he's part of the Jesters Guild. He gets contacts with these folks, and through them learns more secrets about the sewers and getting around the city. He's learned to know when to go down and when not to go down. He frequents the taverns that have a lot of questionable behavior going on in them, in part because he likes those environments, but he learns to who's doing what to whom and why, and takes advantage of that. And he's not, for coin, he's a bit of an information broker, but he's also disinformation. He disseminates things. He has no problem going around and spreading rumors about people. Now, this is the sort where somebody might park outside of some wealthy Yahoo's operation and start whispering into the wrong ears as they go by, did you know, did you not? Right. So Smee works at a different level than Livvi. So his status, which you would think if we look at things like when we think of status, when we think of position, we're always thinking the higher level stuff. But in reality, there's many layers of this, and there's many levels within those layers, and it's something to consider, right? So the Livvi character is almost a investigator type of intelligence gatherer. She's always observant. She's always paying attention more or less to what's going on around her. She's taken an interest in a mystery of the city when there's been a number of wealthy and a wealthy merchant class and some of the noble class personas have gone missing. They're either missing outright or they turn up dead in the streets. She's starting to investigate into this to try to find an answer to it, because, well, for starters, if she can solve something here, she can say that she can figure out the problem. This is going to elevate her in the eyes of her so-called employers and those people within the government who watch that sort of thing. She also would ingrain herself in the eyes of the merchant class, the upper wealthy merchant class, who seems to be the part of the ones that are being preyed on the most in this situation, since it's majority of the people gone missing have been wealthy merchant class family members for one reason or another. And if she can unravel the mystery and perhaps even bring closure to some of these families, it's going to give her more contacts and ingrain her to some degree with some of them, right? So there's a lot of potential in both these characters. And from a social stance, when I look in this city environment, it was a number of my players have commented that they're kind of enjoying the fact that there aren't as many roles and opportunities for combat as what they thought it would be. And the typical Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's a dungeon crawl or overland run or what have you, even ticking around the back alleys of some cities and towns that, as most players and GMs run, there's usually combat. Every other encounter is combat, or every one, 2/3 of the encounters are combat. Well, my environment is probably going to be 1/10 of them being actual combat, unless the players initiate something. The city doesn't generally work that way. The environment, it's more about, keeping your eyes open, your ears open, getting the information on it, people utilizing that information. One of the other characters used his contact to get a heads up on the MacGuffin Hedera, so he could go after him and get his hands on him before the competition knew about it. So he took advantage of the one contact he had, and he parlayed it into something. And potentially, once this is done, and if it's done successfully, and it's not just a little bit of coin that he's going to bring out of it, but he's going to bring in some more elements for himself. He's going to have increased his reputation as a bounty hunter, perhaps as a defender in the right circles. This will open opportunities for him to progress as a character in the city environment, and open opportunities within other organizations. So, if you're a member of the Thieves Guild and you want to progress there, you have to, it's not just about being the best thief in town or being the luckiest thief in town. It's just as much important that you know how to manipulate your superiors, or how to cultivate contacts, and to so on and so forth, right? A lot of diplomacy going on here. It's this kind of city environment, when you look at a magic and a magic user, that certain types of magic that tend to get their noses stuck up at because they're not flashy, and they're not explosive, and they're not offensive in nature, and they're not really defensive in nature, are really meant for this kind of environment. So if you can spy on somebody, you can hide your tracks, you can comprehend languages and understand with somebody having a conversation. You can eavesdrop on people across the room. You can spy on things. You can see, the list just goes on and on. So it's just my observation on it. We're working forward and developing a bigger and richer world and environment for the characters to maneuver and move around in. And it's not necessarily all about the gold or the experience. More about who you know and what you know. Just a little bit of stuff here. Till next time, this is Rick.